Good morning, Instagram family. You made it halfway through the week on this Wednesday. I am so thrilled to be able to do this Instagram Live today because it's really been on my mind a lot of how so many organizations who are doing incredible things for people are able to actually function in the middle of a pandemic. How are they able to serve others in the middle of this pandemic? And that is exactly what one of my good friends, actually, Cara Belvin with EmpowerHer is doing. This organization I discovered on my show on The Story. And Cara came on and talked to me about it. It is an organization for motherless daughters after Cara lost her own mom. And, you know, they had to be mentors to children in person, right? So in this pandemic, I really was curious how they have been able to survive and thrive and still serve these great people. So Cara is going to be joining me here any minute. It says unable to join, but let me see if I add you guys, if it works. Cara might be joining me here in just a moment. Hi, Cara, I think. Thank you guys all for tuning in because I know. Hi, Cara.
Hi, Lynn.
It's so good to see you again.
It's so good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was explaining to everybody that was watching that I met you on my show months ago, and you were talking a lot about how you wanted to expand nationwide. Obviously, this was pre-pandemic. First, before we get into how you have done this brilliantly, which I think many organizations, so that they can continue to serve those in need, can do, I just want you to explain to everyone what EmpowerHer does and really why it's so personal for you, obviously, because it started with your own experience.
Yeah, of course. So I was 9 years old when my mom, Kit, wearing her Kit necklace.
Yeah.
My mom, Kit, died of breast cancer when I was 9. She was 37. And I had a ton of support growing up in Connecticut. I had, great community and loving father and protective big brother and like this army of family and friends, thankfully. But I never met another girl whose mom died, which is so isolating and kind of feel like you're living on Mars for me, it was a good 10 years. I grew up and went to college and became a school psychologist. I married and kids and just sort of recognized a need, that 30 years ago, my mom died, but things haven't changed all that much for a girl like me. There was no real community for a girl like me. And so that's what I did. Around my dining room table 7 years ago with some family and friends, I started EmpowerHer here in Boston. And it just grew, exponentially.
And that was one thing I was
a real nerd.
Right. And the pandemic, obviously, this has been challenging for everyone who's serving someone, right? So your leaders were mentors to these motherless daughters, and they had to, meet in person. That was impossible to do in a pandemic. How did you manage to not only continue what you were doing, but grow EmpowerHer?
With grit, true,
like everything.
True. I mean, there's just no way to sugarcoat this. We were in crisis, March 13th. I knew we had a decision to make. We could close EmpowerHer's doors. We could stop serving the girl. But we had 250 girls enrolled. Just in New England, we were slowly expanding across the country. And you so graciously invited me to talk during the Kobe Bryant Memorial. That was just before COVID, to talk about hope and optimism when a young mother dies. And of, whether or not to close. We decided to keep all programming open. Our mentors were incredibly supportive in that. Our donors were incredibly supportive in that. And we literally reinvented ourselves. We said, okay, if we're all virtual, and you make these jokes about Zooming, but without it, we had nothing. And so we took to Zoom. We not only were able to continue the mentor program, but we reinvented it to really be what I always envisioned. 7 years ago, sitting around my dining room table, I just wanted to build community for girls whose moms died. I just wanted you to meet another girl across town or across the country who knows a little bit about what it is to be you. But I also wanted a little girl to know a 40-year-old woman like me because I'm like an alien on their planet. They see me and they're like, oh, your life went on. You moved forward after your mom died. That pain lessened. So we took it virtual, meaning, yes, now we can match a young girl with a woman, a positive role model, who can relate, but she might live in Texas and you might live in Florida.
Hmm.
We can now do events virtually, and they are a little bit less intimidating for a girl. Previously, EmpowerHer events would bring in hundreds of girls for a beach party and a yoga event, a cooking class with a celebrity chef from Boston. We did these really cool laid back events, but they were intimidating. So now that they're virtual, we kind of eliminated that intimidation factor a bit. And again, just to build community. So grit is what we did. Grit is what it requires. I think when any entrepreneur, whether you're a social entrepreneur like me and it's a nonprofit, or your business was really going so well and you were meeting a need and an unmet need, and then a pandemic that you can't predict. I mean, you have no other choice but to, so.
It was interesting. Christine Diarcole, who's my favorite Peloton instructor, she joined me for an Instagram Live, and she brought you back onto my mind. Christine has talked extensively about her relationship with her daughter, and I have loved hearing that she was partnering with you, to hear that you have been able to bring in these really impactful and really inspirational women to do your good work. Talk to me about some of the ways that not only Christine, but other people have discovered you, and how they're part of why you've grown so much.
When I started this, it was 2013. And I say this now, this really was just an idea I had. And I don't say that out of humility. I say, these people gave it life. And there were people like Christine who maybe could not relate to my loss. A lot of women like Christine would say, thankfully I had my mother growing up. However, I have overcome some of life's greatest challenges, and I can relate on some level to maybe early trauma or hardship and pain. And so it was all of those men and women over the last 7 years who catapulted us. So they believed in this mission, and it was through fundraising, right? I didn't start this with a blank check. I had cocktail party after cocktail party, and we grew and got funded just entirely through individuals and companies. Then we had to write this playbook. So we had to basically go out, research and study and listen and try to talk to other like-minded organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters. They've been doing this for 75 years. So I was trying to learn how best to mentor a young girl in grief, because I wasn't the grief expert. We were not bringing in psychologists. This was not going to be therapeutic based. This was just going to be meeting her where she is. She literally, meet her literally where she is, which is where I was when I was 9. I wanted to talk about my mother. I had no tools, so I never did. So to the outside world, everyone said, well, Cara's fine. Good grades, good athlete, good friends. And
right,
so
on the surface and paper, you looked like you were like any other girl.
Absolutely. And the truth was, and I didn't know this until I was a wife and mom and an adult looking around at this unmet need, I was like, oh my God, I was an at-risk girl. I had early trauma. I call it a trauma. A lot of people might not, but losing my mom at 9 was so painful and traumatic. And I wasn't okay at all by any stretch. I had a normal life. I had a beautiful childhood. There was a lot of love, and there's a lot of laughter. I had so much to be grateful for. But those were the cards I was dealt, and my life became a before and after. There was this little girl named Cara, and she had a beautiful family and a loving and beautiful and smart and funny mom. And then she died. And then the rest is history. I started kind of a new life on that day. And 30 years later, I was meeting all these girls, and they were all saying the same thing as me. They were 12 years old. They were 17, they were 22, in college, and now really struggling, missing mom. And they were all saying the same thing I said. So again, this was just an idea that I had. I said, no one's really doing this, where you could take a child who loses a parent and build community for them, not make them sit around in a circle and talk about it, because I wasn't capable of doing that. And that's not what I was looking for. I needed to know my loss was survivable. So I needed to meet other women who could teach me that. And that's what women, I think, do anyways. When, you know, I am so grateful for a happy marriage and beautiful, healthy children. But I really empathize with those. I have close friends who have experienced a divorce that brought real trauma. And I think that's just what people are looking for, is to not feel alone.
I think right now, more important than ever, I actually thought of you because I can't tell you, I'm 41 years old, and I can't tell you how many times I've called my mom in the middle of this pandemic. I've got 2 little kids, and I'm, you know, in the closet shedding tears, being like, Mom, talk me off the ledge here. I don't know how to parent in a pandemic. I don't know how to do this. I mean, this is what we do. It's what we know. We lean on our parents, if we're lucky enough, our entire life. And this is the time that these children, even you, need that. So what have they said to you, having these women to lean on in this time?
What have the girls said?
Yeah, what have the girls said?
Like, EmpowerHer changed my life. It the trajectory of my life, having just to know that I have these women in my back pocket. That's a little bit of the culture too. If the girls are Zooming and the girls are in isolation, I mean, before the pandemic, I thought of a girl whose mom dies as someone who's isolated. So my mission was to reduce isolation. When I asked a donor for a gift, I say, help me to reduce isolation, because she feels like she lives on Mars. You don't know it because she has good grades and she's a star athlete, but sometimes she feels like she lives on Mars, and I can fix that, because I can't bring her mom back, and she has to live in this new life that she has. And so does her dad and her grandmother. And they're all watching each other grieve, which is an extraordinarily painful experience, to watch someone you love grieve. And why we never are ever judgmental about ways that the girl grieves, or her dad or brother or grandma. So through the last 7 years, these girls have said things to me like, I don't know what I would do without EmpowerHer, because I just needed to know I wasn't alone. And in my school, I'm the only girl whose mom died, and everyone is whispering behind my back. And I heard that whisper 30 years ago. I just thought it was fixed. You know, it's just, and I didn't fantasize of starting a nonprofit. It's a lot of work. And I truly did not fantasize of starting a nonprofit in memory of my mom. I've done a lot of really good things in my life that pay tribute to my mom, and I know she knows it. And I feel really proud of that, of the work that I've always done. But I couldn't say no to this. You know, it's like, you know, you're going to hear something and you know, hear something really sad or really hard, and you have to do something with it. Like, I couldn't unhear it. So and truth be told, I had the idea for EmpowerHer. It wasn't my idea. A girlfriend of mine gave me the idea for EmpowerHer, because I had befriended a lot of young girls here in Massachusetts whose moms had died, and I was just trying to come in and be a support person, like a mentor to them, and a sounding board for dad. And so I had the thought set in the back of my mind for about a year before I ever started this nonprofit. And for that year, it was not unlike a lot of things people do. It's like that you can answer it, or you can just let it nap at you and stay in the corner of your mind. But you know, I think maybe COVID will hit a reset button for a lot of people, and people will start to see that there are things you can do to show empathy, even when you don't understand it. But there are a lot of people hurting, and sometimes there are simple ways to fix that hurt, you know?
I think that hits it right on the head of that nail, is that, this is a time when a lot of people are hitting the reset button. They're thinking of ways that they can do something different that impacts people. That's not just the daily grind. And actually, Vino here, who watches a lot of our Instagram lives. Hi, Vino. Thank you for chiming in with a question. He's asking, what you do is very noble, he says, and it is, Cara, but what are some of the challenges you face on a regular basis, especially now in COVID? You talk about the grit, you talk about the determination. For a lot of people out there that may think of doing something like this, what are the challenges and how do you overcome them?
The challenges in the beginning were more about, putting my grief out there. I was 9 when my mom died, and I didn't talk about it for 30 years. And I know that's really hard to believe, but that is actually quite common. So in the early years at EmpowerHer, what would bring me to my knees, and I mean physically bring me to my knees, was meeting these girls. That was so painful. So I think for a lot of people, out of love and kindness, they don't do the thing because of how hard it is and how painful it is to watch other people's pain. So that was unbelievably difficult in the beginning. It was incredible reporters like you, Lynn, asking me questions about my mother. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't even talk to my husband about this. How dare you ask me something so personal? And the reporter's like, well, you can't deny your mom died. So tell me about your mom. And tears and pain. And so as I started further along in EmpowerHer, and it got so big so fast, I had to quit my day job. There were huge personal and financial sacrifices that a social entrepreneur will make. They will work 7 days a week. That is just a fact. If you're not, you're probably doing something wrong. You will lose some friends in it. You will have to try so hard to not lose your stamina. So if I talk to a lot of people will call me, ask me, for a cup of coffee, can you just help me out? I'm thinking about starting a nonprofit. And really, I am honest and say, join someone else's movement and strengthen it, make it better, do something about injustice for sure, but just careful before you walk into this. Running a nonprofit is an unbelievable endeavor, and it's incredibly stressful to fundraise. Fundraising is just incredibly competitive. And if you're lucky enough, if you're a nonprofit who's lucky enough to maybe have an endowment, but if not, then it takes real, true grit to stay alive during an economic downturn or a global health crisis. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that I love. I'm very honest about. I'll say this because that feels too negative for me to just leave on that note. EmpowerHer is the greatest pride, aside from my 2 children, Murphy and Ava, and being a mom is is all I ever wanted out of this world. It's all I ever really wanted to do. I knew for certain, right, was to build this family. But, and I don't think of EmpowerHer as my baby because I have 2 babies. But there's never been anything more joyful or prideful. I'm so eternally grateful for the world that I live in now, because I don't see the world as a jaded place. I see so much good and kindness and generosity because I raised $2.5 million here over the last 7 years just in Boston. That wasn't mine. That wasn't me. That was people believing in my vision. And so for that, I live in gratitude. All the things that you can talk about being, your authentic self and living in gratitude and living in your truth. I learned over the last 7 years, that's what that means. And there probably wasn't a self-help book or conference I was going to go to help me really understand that, like EmpowerHer did. Not to mention, I were in Chicago business school, and of all the unbelievable experiences he's had, going to business school at Northwestern, I think all the time, this was my business school. Becoming financially, reading financial documents and learning about IRS, requirements and learning about programming and things. It's just an enormous undertaking, and it's one that I'm really grateful for, but I'm always honest about that.
I think that that's so important because for anyone that's wanting to do something, it's never easy. It shouldn't be easy. If it's important, it's hard. But for many people who are watching and maybe inspired to either get involved or financially support the organization, tell us a little bit about how they can do that, where they can find you, and how they can support you.
I should say, first and foremost, if you know and love a girl whose mom died, a girl up to the age of 24 who lives anywhere in the world today because of COVID. Before I used to say, well, we're open in New England and Southern California, and soon we'll be in New York. And so anyone who knows and loves a girl should be encouraged to enroll her, and be encouraged to be brave enough to tell her about EmpowerHer, because it's an uncomfortable conversation, I realize. To tell her dad or grandma or her aunt about EmpowerHer and say, there's this community that you can be a part of, that no pressure, kind of, take what you like and leave the rest. And then additionally, we are always looking for mentors. So a woman like me, a woman over the age of 25 who did experience a loss of her mom at any age, we encourage her to apply to be a mentor. She could be matched with a little girl who's in close proximity wherever she lives, if she lives in Georgia or if she lives in California. Or sometimes the match happens in a virtual context and she can be matched with a young girl who lives all across the world. And lastly, donations. We are kicking off an end of year giving campaign. This is a really important time for nonprofits in general. But due to COVID, to help recoup some lost revenue, we are going to launch a really great end of year giving campaign, and so a major gifts campaign, and really interesting a Luminaria event this Mother's Day. And I just want to kind of leave you with this. It was March 13th when the world sort of changed for us. And I quickly knew I needed to fundraise in order to stay open, but I didn't want to be tone deaf. And we found a way by May on Mother's Day to host a Luminaria event, Mother's Day evening, and we illuminated 1,200 bags here in my hometown. I live in a coastal town in Massachusetts called Scituate, and we illuminated the coast with 1,200 bags that were handwritten with a loved one's name. Maybe your mom who passed away or your mom who's still here that you wanted to honor. It was so successful and it was so moving that we decided to do 10 more this year. So Mother's Day 2021. We're going to bring luminarias to different cities. And so all of that's on our website. I just encourage anyone who's got any interest in sort of, getting involved to just simply reach out to us. It's kind of simple.
I'm going to tag you in this post so people can find your website and things like that. But before I let you go, I'm just curious, what do you think your mom would think of all of this?
Oh, God, I think she's here for it. I think she probably pushed me to it and put people in place at the right time, the right time and place, because I've had a lot of serendipitous moments at EmpowerHer that I don't think could be really otherwise explained. And I just know that she'd be proud, because I'd be immensely proud of my children if they saw a way and simply did something about it. I know that she'd be proud of me for that. And I also think that she will continue to help me when I think about women like her. She was 37 and had to say goodbye to her husband and her 2 children, and she was aware of that, and that is what helps me serve the girl better. Is when I think about the situations that her own mother were in. So I think she'd be most proud that I was just simply trying to do something about it.
We're proud to know you, Cara. You're doing such great work. Thank you for spending some time with me. And we're going to post this so that everyone can learn more about it and get involved so they know where to find you.
Thank you.
About you. Thanks for all your good work.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.